Okay, so in the last class we have seen about tables, right? Tables in HTML. That's fine. Uh, okay, so today what I'm going to discuss is something like input elements. Okay, so before going to the input elements, let me check all these things cover. Okay, and some more tags. Of course, I'll discuss these things later on. For the time being, I just wanna start input elements. Okay, the next half of the HTML elements contain something like input controlling elements. Okay, so we have text area, select, input, button, form. Okay, so till now we have seen some predefined tags for text formatting, containers, and media elements like image, link elements like anchor tag, okay, and table container, etc. And we have some kind of elements that are available inside HTML. Those are called input controls. These input controls are going to capture the input from the user. Okay, so that the user can enter some data inside your web application, so that will be captured and that will be submitted to the server. Okay, let us say how it is going to be and how we are going to deal about these things. So I just start with input elements dot html. Okay. HTML input elements are used to capture the data from the user. Data from the user. At the same time, it will submit the data to the and also okay. I'll talk about it will capture the input from the user. So, for example, we have four types of input elements are there. One is sorry, input control elements. I can say input control, not input element control elements. So one is text area. Second one is just input. Third one is button. Fourth one form. Fifth one, what we have, select. Select. These are the input elements that we have. Five input elements. Okay. The first one, let us talk about. I'll go with the input element. Okay. So input is a kind of HTML element which have what do you call, multiple functionalities inside of it, multiple way of representing the inputs. Okay, so let us see. First of all, type input on the HTML page and press tab. It will automatically complete the some basic syntax for the input element. So you can see uh, this input element consists of a type attribute. At the same time, it has a name attribute. Okay, so type attribute is used to that means I told you already, input has a different ways or different forms of getting the data. Okay, so here I'm going to place a text form or text input field so that the user can enter some text data inside the HTML page. Okay, and I'm not going to give any name for this. For the time being, just provide username. Now what it will do, it will create a text field on the what you call HTML page. I can see you got a text field. Got it? So let me add a label for this. Okay, this is a what you can call as a empty input field. Now what I'm going to do, I want to represent what this input field is going to represent. So I just added a text like this, username. Okay, so when I refresh this, now you're able, it makes sense, right? So you have username, and so that you can enter some whatever username you want, you can enter it. Likewise, input element also has other way of getting the data, that is a password. We can use a password. Input field can be used as a password, and password, the name I just provided as password. Okay, so here also I just want to name it as password. Got it? Now refresh the page. You got a password. Okay, so whatever the characters I'm going to enter, something like X, Y, Z. See, all those are what we call masked by simple dots. Okay, what are the characters? Let me bring the password to the bottom. In order to do that, I'm going to use a break tag so that you will place that particular input field bottom of the HTML page. Okay, so this is the way you can create an input elements and you can get data from the user. Okay, so what are the data that I'm going to enter, that to be either by using a JavaScript code we can read it, okay, or any other kind of mechanism to read the data from the input field, and that can be submitted to the server. Okay, so here one thing I want to represent here, um, HTML elements can be controlled. I told you already, whatever the element that is going to be added inside your web page, okay, that element is an object inside your HTML page. That means object in the sense, it can be controlled. Okay, so here this is one object, this is another object, right? So because of that means each tag inside HTML page is an object, or each element. But whereas coming to this is a plain text. Okay, this is a simple normal text. This is not able to control it. See, let us suppose I want to change the color of this particular text field by using a CSS language. Okay, of course I can do it here, so that I can access what do you call, it's a direct what do you know, text field for the first element. What about the next element? What happens if I place some text after this element? How do I represent this particular? How do I access? See, I have three text elements are there. Okay, I want to access this particular text element. Do you have any control? So here, this is first element. This is second element. Likewise, I want to control this third. What do you call? One second. Okay, so by placing a normal text inside your HTML page, it is not controllable. Okay, this particular text to be surrounded by any kind of tag in HTML, so that we can control it. Okay, so here, if you want to access this particular element, okay, this is what we call, this element is surrounded by, or this was a simple HTML tag, so that you can directly access. It is very difficult to access this particular text through your JavaScript or any other kind of language to access this particular text. Why? Because this is not surrounded by any kind of HTML element, so it is very difficult to control it. So if you want to change the font, if you want to change the what do you call, the style of the characters, if you want to change the color of the content, okay, so it is very difficult when you go for such a plain text. So for this, what I'm going to do, it is better to use a label. Of course, sometimes we use this one. If you don't want to make this as a controllable, you can directly write the text like that. But most of the times we use a controllable tags only. So that is, I'm going to place a label tag. Okay, inside this label tag, I'm going to place that particular text. Okay, so by using other languages, okay, we are able to access this label tag. Okay, some other kind of things that we go for JavaScript, or I'll explain those how to access this particular element and this particular element by using label tag. And I will show you later on how it is difficult to access this plain text through other languages in order to control the HTML elements. Okay, a simple normal text, not HTML elements. So just go for this. I hope you understand why we are going a label tag. Why? Because we are going to make our text to be controllable through either CSS or JavaScript. Okay, so that is why I have taken this one, a label tags. Now it makes sense, right? So just refresh the page. It's the same thing, but of course a small space that is not provided here. Okay, if you look at the previous one without label, you can see the style. Now refresh the page. You just get a simple space, okay, between these two things. So what I'm going to do, take this one. Now it is controllable. Okay. So always, and by the way, let me refresh this one. They should, I did just say this. Might be it has to, okay, I need to put the space. No, there is no space. No. Okay, that's fine. Now, okay, so you can individually control this username and password, okay, because of this label. Okay, you can give some ID for this label, okay, in order to control it, or if you want to place some class attribute or any other kind of attribute you can use so that you can place it, you can control it. Okay, that is why I'm going for this. And right, there is one more element that is used to capture the input. And generally, see why we are capturing the data. We are going to capture the data from the input, okay, like something that to be submitted to the server. According to that, we are going to the server is going to send some other kind of pages. For example, if you go for the Facebook login page, we enter the login credentials. So based on the login credentials, the server is going to send another set of pages that might be our profile, like a Facebook profile or any other kind of things. Okay, so that means it's not enough to capture the input from the user. We need to submit the data, captured data to the server. So in order to do that, we are going to use an element called a form element. Form element. Okay, let me take this one. This is the form element. This is some kind of container. So what this form element will do is, it whatever the data that is going to be captured by the input elements, that will be collectively taken, and that information will be passed to the server. Okay, let us see how it is going to be. So here what I'm going to do, from use to collect data from the user and submit it to server. Okay, so let us see how it is going to be. In form we have something called a method attribute is there. We are going to use a method called get. I will explain what is a get. Okay, for the time being, assume that we have some kind of method in order to submit the data to the server. Okay, and right, so let me add a button, submit, sorry, input element itself. Okay, that is submit, submit. It doesn't require any name for this. If I say input type equal to submit, it will create one button on your HTML page, and by default, when I click on this particular button, it will gather the data what is there inside the input elements. All that data will be submitted to the server in the form of URL. Okay, so the data will be appended to the URL. Okay, so let us see. Mm, let me add two BR statements here again and refresh the page. You have the submit button, right? So here what I'm going to do, I just want to submit the data. For the time being, this is my URL. Okay, assume this is a local API. I can say this is what in call file API. This is file API. This is not your internet API, internet URL API. Okay, this is file API. Why? Because we are going to. This is also URL, but this is used to get the resource inside the local system. Okay, so let us assume this is one kind of URL, and how this data is going to be appended to the URL. Okay, for example, I'm going to enter username something like Santosh. Okay, and password um, gets me something like that. When I submit it, you can see in the URL itself. See, after the URL, there is a what you call a question mark is there. Okay, indicating that query. Okay, question mark is after the question mark you have the input data username Santosh, and there is an ampersand, that means n symbol, that is used to separate the input data. Okay, this is one input data, this is another input data. See, the username and password that is going to be sent over the what you call sent to the server through URL like this. Okay, so this is the one way of sending the data to server. Okay, whatever the data you can take. For example, if you go for google.com, okay, I just want to search for something like Modi speech, something like that. If I do that, now you can see it itself adds some question mark, and of course, Google is very sophisticated application. It it's sending the data like whatever the thing is. I have a question Modi plus speech. Okay, the space is going to be considered as a space, and it's adding something Modi speech again. Okay, something they're using different kind of things here might be, and it's also might be this will be this is not my coordinates. um, I don't know what the information that is going to be passed through this URL. Okay, it's not my IP address or some other kind of what do you call um, encrypted data here. Okay, so might be the server information or my local computer browser information, something it might be there. So along with the C, every search what we are going to do in the Google, that will be sent like this by placing ampersand symbol and question mark. This form of sending the data is nothing but method get, because get is a method used to send the data to the server. The data to be encapsulated, the data will be provided itself inside the username only, sorry, URL only. Okay, there is another method called post. So what this post will do is this kind of information won't be displayed inside the URL. That will be hidden by inside some HTTP objects. So here, when my URL contains username and password, anyone can see this, right? So if it is a what do you call a get method, I can see username and password in the URL itself. So anyone can see it, and anyone can enter into my what do you call my login credentials of it might be bank application, or it might be a social media application, whatever the thing. Okay, so sometimes we need to hide this kind of data not in the URL. In order to do that, we use a post method. Now generally what happens here is, see, our internet is completely based on HTTP protocol. Okay, hypertext transfer protocol. Generally, if you know some kind of things about the what you call computer networks, what we do, we connect the systems either through wire or wireless. We use some kind of protocols to transfer the data called TCP or IP, transmission control protocol or internet protocol. By using these protocols, we can send the raw data. Okay, but internet is complex. Okay, the data will be different kinds of data, not its simple raw bits. Why? Because in the internet we are going to handle video data, audio, graphics, animations, text, okay, images as well, a different kind of data you can find. So it's not a good idea to go for a raw protocol like this. So that the people have designed some kind of protocol called http protocol. Protocol means it's a set of rules to govern the communication between two systems or a number of systems inside the computer. Okay, so a http protocol is something like is used in the internet to send the data, okay, in a some kind of a mechanism where it has some header section. The data will be sent like this. It has some header section, the details about the local system, all these things will be present in the header section, and it has some data section. Okay, and this particular http object will transfer to what we can call other computer. Okay, so here we have two parts. The http data will be then the is of two parts. One is header data, second one is normal user data. Okay, what the header data will do is it might use something like it will capture the what you call data about our system, local system, and what kind of browser that we are going to use, and it might be what you call what type of encryption algorithm that we are going to use to send the data. All these things will be there inside this http header. Okay, hypertext transfer protocol. So if you want to hide this data not in the URL, you need to encapsulate this data inside this what do you call the data part of the HTTP data packet. Okay, so in order to do that, you have to use just a post method. You can use a post method like this. If you use post method, whatever the data that we are going to capture through input element, that will be placed inside the HTTP data section. For example, let us go for this mode speech. Press F12 on the keyboard. Just go to the network tab. Again, refresh it. I send a URL, sorry, some data. I was getting a lot of data from. Now this is the sketch. When I click on this, see this my browser is going to show the HTTP data in different sections like header section, a response section. This is actual data what we are going to get. Okay, and some kind of cookies and timing, all those things. Now let us see what the header contains. The response is your HTML page, that Google HTML page related to this mode is search. Okay, uh, right. So this is what we can call this is the response. That means this is this HTML page that we got from the Google server. Now what the Google sent to me in the header part. Now you can see the response header. That means response header in the sense this is came from the server, Google server. See, Google is using a get method in order to send this Modi speech data to the Google server. Okay, you can see the request method is get. By using this get method, we can place the data itself in the URL. This URL is not that much sensitivity, right? Mode speech or some kind of search what we are going to. This can be seen by any kind of people. If it is a username password, uh, it should be very highly secure, right? So what I'm going to that is why the Google is using get method in order to send the data, such kind of less sensitivity data that can be sent through get method. And we got a status code. Status code is something like what you call indicating that whatever the request that you made to the Google server, that is valid and Google accepted it. Okay, that is called status code. Google send an acknowledgement after we send a URL to the Google. Okay, and this is the address of the Google, and this is the port number. Okay, probably you know about this one, IP address and port number. And we have something called a refer policy origin. That means you are directly accessing Google server, Google origin only, no other third party. Okay, and response header, you can see some kind of things. I don't go for this one, alternate SVC, all these things. Just content encoding BR. No, content type you can see. The Google sent a content which is of either text or HTML. Okay, and the character set is UTF-8, universal UTF font, something like that. 8 means it contains only English characters. Okay, representing that UTF-8 means the page itself contains only English characters. Okay, if the page contains some other characters or some other language characters, then we can go for UTF-16. Okay, and the date is Wednesday and 20th September 14:13. That means it will be at Africa. Okay, I think it's 5 hours before, after this, what is called my time. Okay, I think it's 7:46 to me. It is 14:13. Okay, you just go to the maps and you can find out the times based on that. You can see something like uh, time zone map or something. Just go for this, you can understand something like this. See, this is UTC. Actually, India is at this point +5. This is at 12 o'clock. Okay, so what is the time that we found? It is 14:13 minutes. It's 2:13, right? 2 o'clock. Might be it's around here. India is at +5 somewhere here. What at the 14? Let's go. So based on this time, we can find. We can look at our Google server. Where does we got the data? Okay. Might be you may get different kind of uh, time in your browser. Okay, because you're in other location. Now the server name is Google Web Server, and the status of expert is -1. Some kind of what do you call things that are there inside the header. Okay, and this is request header. Request header means this header part is belongs to my computer. Okay, that was sent to the server. This header path belongs to Google server, and that was sent to me. Okay, now you can see I sent something like that means my browser can accept either text or HTML or any other kind of XHTML or XML or application with XML, some other images, all those things. Okay, and the method is get only. The way we send the data is get, and accepted encoding algorithms English. Okay, and we have some cookies. We'll talk about the cookies, all those things, and see the cookie is also sending my SSID. My SSID means my Wi-Fi adapter name. Okay, that was encrypted actually. Wi-Fi adapter name. I don't know what is HSID. All those things, and Google will also track my what is it called? Um, what it's called? My IP address, my location, all those things. Okay, so date I got. Okay, something like that, and you can see user agent. This is very important. User agent nothing but it is our browser. Okay, my browser. By using this browser, I'm going to send data to this. So without browser, of course we can send data to the servers using command prompt also. Okay, so here I'm using browsers to send the data to the servers. Okay, so the user agent is, you can see the Chrome, the version is 60.0.311, something like that. If it is a Firefox, you will get a Firefox, not Mozilla. Okay, Firefox. Likewise, for Internet Explorer, you will have MSIE. Okay, so this is going to represent what kind of browser and what version of browser I'm going to use in my local system. And you have some query strings. What kind of query that is made by the user? Something like a Modi switch, Modi set, something like a Modi speed, something like that. Okay, these are the query strings that I made. So this is completely belong to HTTP header and data part that is going to be exchanged between server and the client. Now I told you, if you don't want to place your sensitive information inside the URL, definitely you have to go for post method. If you place get method, whatever the data that is going to be captured by the input field, that will be placed in the URL, right? So if you don't want to place in the URL, you just go for post method. Got it? So how this post method is going to place our content? Okay, now let us see. I just change the post. Now let us see here. This is my application, right? So press F12 and let's suppose enter something like uh, test name. Okay, guess guess me something password. These are the values. Now let us see. Here I sent some data to server. Here there is no server. Okay, why? Because this is my file API. So this will be stored inside my local browser only. When I click on this, okay, there is no response from the server, right? Why? Because we don't have the server, but we made some request headers. It's just representing what you call the user is in details, and this is a query string. The username is test name and password. Okay, did I? Okay, it's already post method, right? No, I didn't change this one. Now let me refresh this page again. So now it was sent as a post method. Now let us try. What is that? Test. Let me change this to test username. GUES. Guess me. Now let us submit it. And by the way, I'm sorry. I need to remove. It should be very fresh URL. Okay. This is test username. GUES. Guess me. See, I don't get the data in the URL. Okay. So the data was captured through this what you call input element that was placed inside the data of the HTTP header HTTP part. Now you can see this is form data, not query. This is not representing or is not going to show in the URL. Got it? So that is the difference between post method and get method. Okay. So if the data is less sensitivity, then it is better to go for get method. Why? Because get method is very easy. Okay. So we can easily communicate with the servers, whereas post method is some kind of, it's not, of course it's also easy, but uh, most of the people will use get only. Okay, why? Because it has been, it became a habit, okay, by placing a get method. So if it is a more sensitive to data, then try to go for post method, that to be hide the data inside the HTTP packet. Okay, so that is about the post and get method. So now let us see. Let me add get method here and refresh the page. Okay, for the time being I'm using get method only. Now let me add some more input elements. What I want to do, there is other kind of what is it called what is it, sorry, one second. Field field set, FIELD field. There is a one kind of tag is there that is called field set, so that we can categorize the input element based on its usage. Okay, like this. So I just categorize the username and password. See, that was placed with a simple rectangle box that was separated. Okay, so you can add one more what we call legend. Okay, something like sign in info. See, you are getting a sign in info a label on this particular rectangle box. So that can be possible with field set and the legend. Got it? Likewise, let us create one more set of data. I'm going to take that is sign in information. The next one is uh, general information. General information. Now what I'm going to do, I just want to place, let me take it out. Um, Something like gender. Okay, I want to represent its gender. Now you can see gender information, so that we can categorize by using this what we can call a field set tag or field set element. So gender. See, this is not a good idea to place a text field for the gender. Why? Because it's typing. It's not a good idea. So it should be much interactive. In order to provide the interactive, we just go for something called radio buttons. Radio. Okay. What I'm going to do for the radio button, I can place. I don't want any name for the time being. For the time being. Okay. Now let's see. Refresh the page. See, we got a radio button. Okay. What is the use of radio button? We can select one option out of many options. Okay. By using radio button, we can select one out of many. So I want some text for this. So what I can do? Let me take this one. Male. Okay. And I want one more radio button that is female. See, I got two radio buttons, right? So you can select any one of these things. Oops, both got selected. So how do we make this to be what do you call single selection out of many? So in order to do that, remember you have to provide the name. Okay, the name will be gender and refresh the page. See, for both elements, you have to provide a common name. If you provide two separate name means both are not going to be grouped up. If you want to group up the radio buttons, definitely you have to use a common name for this inside the input elements. That is one of the important thing. Correct? This is what is called. And by the way, every time it is asking about. Okay, so that is about the general information. What I can, what other information that I can go for is. Uh, 1 second, please. Okay, so we just added what we call input elements like this, and let me add any other generic information like mm, registration ID. Okay, so generally registration ID will be a number. So registration ID, let us type registration ID, something like that. So you can use a number category. Okay, of course, sometimes it may not be an ID. You can use a text field as well. Refresh the page and you got registration ID. So this is a number. When you can increment it or you can type some numbers inside of it, something like that. That is some kind of generic information. If you want to add an email, you have something called email. Okay. You can also use a text field for the email, but in HTML5, more what you call more number of input element that was added, something like email, number, something like that. So, oops, this is our email. Okay, so something like this, email. So you can see this is where you can enter some email. When I'm not going to place any @ symbol, it's asking for the @ symbol. Okay, that is called validation. We can call it as a validation. Automatically it has some kind of validation. If you don't place @ inside the email, so the input element consider it is a wrong email address. Okay, so such kind of validation that we have inside a default validations that is there inside our HTML5 elements. Of course we have some other validation attributes are there, we'll add later on. So for the time being, let us understand, and let me go for some other things. So let me add one more field set. Okay, so what I can do, label um, course. Inside this course, what kind of course you want to take? Okay, input element, uh, text, course details. Okay, something like this. What I can call legend. So you are as a course details. Okay, and the name will be course name. Okay, this text field. See, I'm going to create one more set of details. Likewise, okay, what kind of date you want to start? Okay, so you can use a date object here. Date. Now refresh the page. When you say date, you will get something like that. When you use a type equal to date, you will get a calendar. When I click on this, see, date formatted input field. You can use this calendar and you can select what date you want to start, or date of commencement, date of start or commencement, see, something like that. Okay, I need to add BF statements. Okay, see, okay, like this. Okay, and it is not a good idea to use a course like this. What do you call? We want to reduce our application to be more accessible, right? So that is why we are providing such kind of radio buttons, okay, checkbox buttons, and something like this. Date, okay. So user doesn't show interest to enter date by using slashes, all those things, okay. So that is why we are providing a calendar so that you can easily enter the date, all those things, okay. And that is what is called accessibility and ease of way of easy, what do you call, ease of accessing the applications, okay. So I want to replace this input field with a select. You have one more element that is there called select. Okay, you can use instead of this, you can use select. Inside this, I need to place a list of options for that. What type of courses that is going to provided by the UI desk. So you can take something like web development. Okay, option 1, option 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's take 5 here. Uh, okay, web development. Let's go something like this. Mm, JavaScript. Okay, Java. Okay, HTML, CSS, Angular, Angular, React, some kind of frameworks, Amber, and we have something called mm, MySQL, Mongo. You have something like, see, we got a list. Oh, sorry, I need to br or refresh the page. Now you have a list of courses that the user want to take. Okay, so I want to take JavaScript, and if you want to take HTML. Okay, so whatever the input that we provided, that will be captured through options. There is an attribute called value. So you need to specify some numbers for each and every option. So when we read this value inside JavaScript, based on the number, we can understand what type of course that particular user got selected. Okay, so through JavaScript we need to get this data. So if Java got selected, the value will be 2. If JavaScript got selected, value will be 1. So based by providing these values, we can understand what kind of course that is selected by our user. 5, 6, 7, 9, something like that, and refresh the page. Okay, you don't find those values here, and by default it is showing what is called as JavaScript. But currently Angular or React is most famous, so I want to select this as the first one. So selected something like this. This is the boolean attribute. You can either you can use like this or just like this. Okay, by default Angular will be highlighted, so by default the user can go for this one. Okay, and if you want to select multiple, okay, you have to use a boolean attribute multiple attribute inside a select field. Click on this, you have multiple. You can select some people wants to select JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and React JS. There is Angular is also there. Okay, likewise you can select it and submit it. All those data will be sent. So remember, you have to provide a name for each and every element in order to display it in the get element. Okay, you have to provide that in codes, something like that. Okay, all those information will be transferred through server through this URL. And if you want to categorize this, okay, these set of options, okay, opt group we have. By using this opt group, we have something we can categorize like this, and opt group, opt group. So here something like yeah, sorry, label we have. By using the label, I'm going to differentiate this one. So we can place some separator inside the select items. So inside this languages, this is frameworks. What kind of frameworks you want? Frameworks. What languages you want to select? What frameworks you want to select? And what database you want to learn? Database languages. Okay. Now let us refresh this. See, you have a categories label. Inside that you have JavaScript, Java, HTML, all those things. For what you can call frameworks, we have something like this. Okay, these are the useful things that you can differentiate the elements inside of a HTML. You can see that will be good. See, it's a good idea, right? This is more accessible and more easy way of understand what is there, what type of courses that is provided by this URL, something like that. Okay, and